All aboard! Welcome to another episode of the All Aboard podcast. I am your host, Brandon DeFreitas. Happy to be with you here on this episode. Last week, we went through and finished up the AFC East. And this week, we're going to start with the NFC West. As mentioned on last week's podcast, we're going to go through the San Francisco 49ers. And the surprise team here, the Arizona Cardinals, are going to be reviewed on this podcast as well. For anyone new to the All Aboard podcast, a little bit of background here. We're going team by team. So far, we've done the AFC East, and those four teams you can find in episodes 1 through 3. And our goal is to look at the contracts of all the skill position players and identify opportunities for Dynasty Fantasy Football League owners to take advantage of these tidbits that maybe their league mates are missing when they're just looking high level and not necessarily digging into the contract details. So the more we can dig up on these contracts and the more information we can glean from them on who has a good chance at what role, who has a chance at longevity, and how long are they going to be given opportunities to stay on the team, the more opportunities and advantages you can have in your fantasy league. So thank you to everyone who's been following us here. We're going to keep it going. If you like this episode and like what we're doing here, please hit that like button. And, of course, smash that subscribe button. We love adding subscribers here. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. At this point, we're on pretty much wherever you can get podcasts to search the All Aboard podcast. And I, of course, am on Twitter at the Fantasy CPA. So feel free to give me a follow. A lot of retweets on my account from what I find on beat reporters from The Athletic as they're attending training camp. So definitely, feel free to find me on there, and hopefully it's a good follow for you. But we're going to jump right in here to the 49ers, and midway through the episode, we will switch over to the Arizona Cardinals. On next week's episode, we'll go ahead and review the other two teams in the NFC West. But kicking it right here with the San Francisco 49ers, starting with the quarterback position. We've gone through a lot of these because we went through the AFC East, and we had Mac Jones, we had Tua Tagovailoa, who was a rookie the year before, and of course we had Zach Wilson. So we're looking at Trey Lance now, who was picked in the same draft as Wilson and Mac Jones. Trey Lance in the second year of his rookie deal. And like we said with those two, it's really a 3-year trial period for these first-round rookie quarterbacks. So Trey Lance is going to get his first opportunity to start full-time for the 49ers this season, giving the 49ers this year and next year 2 seasons to see how he looks and decide on that 5th-year option. And that's probably part of their motivation to start Trey Lance over Jimmy Garoppolo. We'll get into money, sure, when we talking about Jimmy in a second, but money aside, they were pretty successful with Jimmy Garoppolo. They went to a Super Bowl in 2019, and then they end up making it all the way to the NFC Championship game last year. They could have, ball bounces a certain way. They could end up winning a championship here and there with Jimmy Garoppolo. They could have 2. So I think the reason you see them going out here and being so adamant about starting Trey Lance is the fact that they do have to make that decision after the 2023 season. And they need to see what they have in Trey Lance. And so I would expect, from fantasy football, everyone's excited about Trey Lance because he's a dual threat quarterback. He's got a cannon arm. He can run the football, which is really important in fantasy football for a quarterback. So we're all excited for him. I think as a dynasty owner, obviously you're hoping for more, but at a minimum, you're going to have him this season and next season trying out for that 5th-year option. And if all goes well, he'll be extended after the 2023 season. Moving on to Jimmy Garoppolo, we kind of hit on it. He's extremely expensive this year. He has basically a $27 million cap hit, and only $1.4 million of it represents dead cap. So they can wipe the majority of that off the books and clear cap space as long as he's not on the roster come week 1. So I believe it's August 31st is when they have to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo Otherwise, they're paying him the full $26 million. And like we said, the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan, they've already come out and they've said, hey, Jimmy's our quarterback Trey Lance is our quarterback this season. Jimmy's, he's taken over for Jimmy. So when you look at Jimmy Garoppolo, it's like, all right, are the 49ers really going to pay him $26 million to be a backup or just sit there and wait for an injury for a trade? Probably not, especially since the contract becomes guaranteed on week 1. So time's a ticking. We're a third through August at this point. So they have to make a decision by the end of August, and I would expect them to sort of hold on to Jimmy Garoppolo as long as they can, because right now doesn't seem like there's much of a trade market. Like, let's look at the teams who can kind of make a play for him. Cleveland Browns, if they want, a backup to play while Deshaun Watson's on suspension. But that's still up in the air. The Watson stuff is still to be decided. So you can see why the Browns aren't making a move. A couple other teams, the Texans and Giants, but based on where both those teams are in their development track, it doesn't really make sense for either team. If you're the Houston Texans, you should really be looking at what can we get from Davis Mills? What does he look like? And then if you're the Giants, you're trying to figure out if Daniel Jones is the guy. Now, I'd make the contention they've already decided he's not. But still, I mean, they're pretty new in their trajectory here for the rebuild. So trading for a Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't make a whole lot of sense. All of this to say, it's really the Browns and the Seahawks that are the teams that make the most sense for Jimmy Garoppolo to be traded to, or, to go and play this season in the NFL. Problem is, if you're the 49ers, and if I'm the 49ers, there's no way I'm giving him to the Seattle Seahawks. So they have to really hope something else materializes and they can trade Jimmy outside of division. Otherwise, if they have to cut him to clear his salary off the books, there's a high chance the Seattle Seahawks are going to come in and say, you know what, he's a much better option than Drew Lock and Geno Smith. So the one thing I've been wondering is, how much is it worth to the 49ers? I mean, you're not paying Trey Lance that much money because he's on a second-year rookie deal, and it seems incredibly unlikely. So I don't want to go on record and be like, this is going to happen, but it has to at least cross their mind and be like, do we just pay him to sit there for us as injury insurance this season? Because we'd rather do that than if he goes to the Seattle Seahawks, all of a sudden your division contender, your division opponent and rival is competing with you. Because right now, the Seattle Seahawks are not much of a threat with what they have at quarterback. If they have Jimmy Garoppolo, they're immediately a playoff contender in the NFC. So it has to be something they're considering. That said, it's incredibly unlikely. I think the way this is going to go is they're hoping Jimmy Garoppolo, they're hoping an opportunity opens up somewhere. They're not hoping for an injury, but if it happens, the 49ers will take it and they'll take advantage and trade Jimmy Garoppolo. And at the last second, maybe they cut him otherwise. But, man, that'd be a really hard decision, because if from the 49ers perspective, if you're cutting Jimmy Garoppolo, he could end up in a Seattle Seahawks uniform pretty quickly. So I did just want to throw that out there and be like, I wonder, like, it's got to be really tough for them just knowing that their division rival could be the most likely landing spot for Jimmy Garoppolo. But it's Trey Lance, and we're on the 49ers, so it's definitely Trey Lance for this season. Backup-wise, Nate Sudfeld is on a 1-year, $2 million fully guaranteed deal. So he's going to be here. He's guaranteed to make the team and is probably the likely backup, I would say. I don't think Brock Purdy, who we're going to talk about here, is really a threat to that. So Nate Sudfeld's looking like the backup. If you're in a deep super flex, that's the guy you got to have in mind for backing up Jimmy Garoppolo. Backing up Trey Lance. See, I'm not even used to it yet. It's unbelievable. Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant in this year's draft, rookie quarterback. And I did want to point out from Brock Purdy's perspective, oftentimes late in the NFL draft, these prospects actually want to go undrafted. And you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. But Brock Purdy only got a $77,000 bonus, Whereas you see some of these undrafted free agents, they sometimes get bonuses up to $200,000 because all of a sudden it's the competition in the market. Teams are trying to throw out these bonuses. They usually have like a certain bonus pool from ownership, and they're throwing as much as they can at the top guys that they missed out on in the draft. So I know the Athletic Football Show had a great podcast with Nate Tice. Mike Tice's son is actually on the Athletic now. And he was talking about how you'd have these bonus pools, and like in the last round of the draft, you're calling up all these prospects, and some prospects are like they don't even want to be drafted because they want to go, they want to pick their destination and negotiate their bonus. So just interesting, Mr. Irrelevant. Yep, final draft pick, but could be a bittersweet moment for you as a prospect because your bonus and your financial. What you're getting financially from the league is not quite what it would be as if you were an undrafted free agent. As for Brock Purdy, nothing much here on a dynasty perspective. Just I would monitor as a potential long-term backup, but no one you need to carry or anything like that. So for this season, it's Trey Lance, Nate Sudfeld as the backup, and Trey Lance for at least 2 more seasons here with the 49ers. Getting to the running back position, and a high-level note here, man, the 49ers, they do a really good job of drafting and replacing. It's almost like Patriots West here. They're always just drafting these guys, and the cap hits reflect it as we go through this running back room here. Elijah Mitchell, clear-cut starter. He's in the second year of his rookie deal. He was a 7th-round pick last year. He has an $870,000 cap hit, and that's it. So, I mean, like, you hit on these late-round draft picks, especially at the running back position, it's so big for you. Tyrion Davis-Price was a 3rd-round pick this year. He's probably going to be the main backup to Elijah Mitchell. He's on a $1.1 million cap hit. So you're going to see a lot of this as we go down. Since they're all young and rookies, not a whole lot contract notes here, but Tyrion Davis-Price, 4-year rookie deal that he starts this year. Trey Sermon, similar to Elijah Mitchell, he was drafted earlier last year, former 3rd-round pick. He's in the second year of his 4-year rookie deal. And then Jeff Wilson, entering his age 27 season, was a 2018 undrafted free agent, and he's in the last year of his deal with $570,000 dead cap. So those top 4 guys, I mean, you're looking at 2 guys drafted last year, Tyrion Davis-Price drafted this year, Jeff Wilson, a 2018 undrafted free agent. You go down the list again, JaMychal Hasty, a 2020 free agent, Jordan Mason, a 2022 undrafted free agent. So what I really wanted to highlight here for the 49ers is doing a tremendous job just adding youth through the draft or through undrafted free agents after the draft, and that's their entire running back room, and that's why it's so cheap. The most expensive player against their cap is Trey Sermon, who's a $1.1 million cap hit, which really isn't too bad. So they've done a tremendous job here just replenishing that running back room. Now, I kind of did a tease last week about the 49ers, and I was like, there's something I want to talk about before the season, get it on record. And that's a little tidbit I picked up from David Lombardi, the 49ers beat reporter from The Athletic. Midway through last year, I was the Elijah Mitchell owner in my redraft league, and he was talking about how, at the time, Jeff Wilson was coming back from injury, and he said, well, what's interesting is part of the reason they may have drafted Trey Sermon was because he's a bigger back, and when they do option plays with Trey Lance is going to be doing the outside zone, and then you're going to have a bigger back to be sort of the thunder to Trey Lance's lightning. And it makes sense if you think about it. You're doing an option, and Lance, takes the outside part, and then the inside back is just going right up in there in between the tackles, kind of pounding. And you look at the running backs they've picked. Trey Sermon, 215 pounds. Tyrion Davis-Price, 219 pounds. Jeff Wilson's 213. Jordan Mason, the undrafted free agent, 220 pounds. The only light guys in the room are Mitchell and Hasty. So Lombardi's point last year was, well, they can't hit the outside zone because their guys are too, the only guy quick enough to hit the outside zone was Elijah Mitchell and Raheem Mostert previous to the injury. But what the 49ers really had in mind, he thought, was Trey Lance being the guy to hit the outside zone on the option play and a bigger back inside. So I thought it was a really interesting tidbit, and it stuck with me since mid last season. And, for David Lombardi, like I hope I paraphrased it right, but the main point I'm trying to make for fantasy is everyone's like, what? Why do they keep drafting these bigger backs? Is it just because their running backs get hurt? That could be part of it, but I think it's also the fact that they envision a slightly different running back type or running attack with Trey Lance. Trey Lance is going to be doing a lot of those quick speed type runs, and then you're going to want a big pounder to complement him on the inside. And I would have said, maybe it's not. That's not what's going on. But for them to draft Trey Sermon, a bigger back, and then draft Tyrion Davis-Price, I think they have a little bit of a vision here with what they want with Trey Lance. And that's not to say Elijah Mitchell is not going to be used a lot. He's too good not to be. But I do think what it's saying is they have a vision of having some bigger backs in this offense. And it's not going to be all Elijah Mitchell like it was last year. I would expect his per game volume to go down a little bit. And I think the 49ers will like that too, just like we said for the injury perspective. So I think my takeaway here is I'd be in on Tyrion Davis-Price in a dynasty. They drafted him. He fills that role that they saw for Trey Sermon. And I would be in on him on a redraft too. If you can get him for your last round price. I think Tyrion Davis-Price is the whole point in me bringing up this bigger back inside, run perspective here that I picked up from David Lombardi. I wouldn't necessarily be out on Trey Sermon in a dynasty, but at the same time, they're telling you when they draft Tyrion Davis-Price that they're trying to fill a role that Trey Sermon was unable to fill. You look at it, the rest of these guys, Jeff Wilson's the last year of his deal. Hasty is a restricted free agent after this season, so they could bring him back if they want. Again, the nice thing about replenishing your running backs through the draft, well, the positive there is, you got cheap backs and no one's really coming up for a contract that you're really itching to pay. So plenty of youth and good value here at the running back position. That's the way I think you should really make your running back room in today's NFL. All right. Well, that was the running backs. That was the whole point. Hopefully I didn't oversell it in the last episode, but I did want to bring up that point there with the larger backs in the 49ers offense. The receiver position, obviously Deebo Samuel, age 26 season, just got that 3-year, $71 million extension with $58 million guaranteed. So like we've done with some of these other larger deals, I just kind of want to take it from the perspective of how long is it really? And when you look at it, it looks to me, so it's a 3-year extension. I think it might be more like a 2-year extension when it comes down to it. So 2022 is still on his rookie deal. And then you have 2023 and 2024. Here's how the cap and dead cap line up. So I'm going to start with this year. This year's $6.6 million cap, $41 million dead cap. 2023, $8.6 million cap, $35 million dead cap. 2024, $28.5 million cap, $26 million dead cap. So this year and 2 years, they just can't move on from him. And not that they would want to anyway, but 2025, $24 million cap, $15 million dead cap. And here I kind of noted, I think the team would be fine paying him $24 million in 2025, but Deebo might want a new deal at that point, because when you look at the cash coming in that year, Deebo's only going to be getting paid $16 million cash in 2025. So I see this as almost more of a 2-year extension and then probably a renegotiation at that point, which would mean 2022 through 2024. That's just a guess, though, so based on the numbers here. So maybe they could play out that deal. I just think Deebo, if he's still playing at a high level, is probably going to want a new deal and more cash at that time. There are 2026 and 2027 added onto those deals, and you're like, wow, where did those years come from? Those are void years. And a quick thing about void years, they're just years added on to the end of the contract to spread out the bonus and spread out the cap hit. So 2026 and 2027 are never going to happen. Like, the contract voids before then, and it's just in there for a cap mechanism. And I wanted to highlight it because this was the first team we've gone into to use these void years, and a couple of their contracts use them. And it's just interesting because some teams won't use them and borrow from the future cap. And not saying the Pats won't use them, they have in the past, but the 49ers did in this case, and I think it was in George Kittle deals as well. So just an interesting little tidbit here on the void years. Brandon Ayuk, the number 2 receiver, or could be a 1B this year, if you ask Matt Harmon of Reception Perception. He's in the 3rd year of his rookie deal, so the team has to decide after this season. So really a make or break year for Brandon Ayuk, and that makes him, for me, a strong buy in a dynasty format, because there's major motivation for him, and Matt Harmon's highlighted there's also a lot of talent here, and he might fit more as a downfield option with Trey Lance than he really ever fit with Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think there's some serious upside here with Brandon Ayuk that's not, being talked about. Partially because people like me in the industry who got burned by him last year. So I like Ayuk. I think, he's a buy in a dynasty format. And on this team, really, Tyrion Davis-Price and Brandon Ayuk are my 2 major buys based on what we're looking at here on a contract perspective. Jawan Jennings, the 3rd receiver. He's in his age 25 season. He was an undrafted free agent in 2020. So he's an exclusive rights free agent after this year because he'll only have 3 years of team control at that point, or 3 years in his career. So that means the team can easily re-sign him. We'll go over exclusive rights free agent in a little bit here, but essentially what it means is as long as a team gives you a tender offer, you can't negotiate with another team. So I would expect Jawan Jennings back here next year, and then the following year he'll be hitting unrestricted free agency. Danny Gray, rookie 3rd round pick. He's here, and he's fast. I know Dan Brugler of The Athletic compared him to, he said if there's a Darnell Mooney in this draft, it's going to be Danny Gray available a little bit later. So the 49ers really interested in his speed, but it's funny, Brandon Ayuk had a comment this week that said it's nice having Danny Gray around so that Kyle Shanahan can annoy someone else. So supposedly Danny Gray's been getting the ire of Kyle Shanahan in training camp. We know how Shanahan was a former receiver himself in college, and he's notoriously tough on that position. So I don't expect much from Gray this season, but he's a good dynasty asset because solid draft capital here, and he's got a lot of speed that could mesh with Trey Lance. So I do like Danny Gray as well. Ray McLeod, 26 years old, signed a 2-year, $4 million contract. $2.8 million of that is guaranteed. So it's a roster lock for this year. And looks like roster lock for 2022. And then the team can move on with only $875,000 next year. So I think you're looking at him as a slot option this year for the 49ers and special teams type player. And then, I wouldn't count on much more than this year. Not that you're really looking at Ray McLeod anyway in a dynasty, but this does kind of get to a point I was going to bring up with the Arizona Cardinals too, which is kind of funny. This podcast is pretty excited for the preseason to end, or at least the first cutdown day, because we don't want to leave any stones unturned for you guys. But I do have to say, sometimes you're going down the roster list and you're like, at what point do we drop off? Like, we're about to talk about Malik Turner here for the 49ers. Like, at some point we want these rosters set. We're going over 5 receivers, maybe 6, so we're pretty excited for the regular season in that respect. Not that we're complaining at all or anything. Malik Turner, 26 years old. They got him from the Cowboys on a 1-year, $1 million deal. Only $300,000 of that is guaranteed. Means not a roster lock. Maybe if they don't keep him, the Cowboys with their receiver issues get him back. So a little interesting note there. The rest of it, here we go. This is where you get to me being a little bit done with the giant rosters. Marcus Johnson, Keyshawn Johnson, and Willie Snead are the other receivers on this team. All veteran depth. Willie Snead signed a couple days ago, so there's no contract details. But the highest dead cap is Marcus Johnson, former Colt, at $250,000. So, as you could imagine, not a roster lock. Tay Martin, I saw him here, 2022 undrafted free agent. He impressed me. I watched some of the East-West Shrine Bowl, and he was making a lot of plays. So, I could see him being an interesting player in this offense. But that said, there was nothing of note for him on Twitter, so could just be a practice squad guy. I would keep that name in the back of your head, Tay Martin, because it wouldn't surprise me if at some point in his career he emerges for the 49ers. But, yeah, just keep that as a little note in the back of your head. Moving on to the tight end position, and George Kittle, we talked about his void year a little bit earlier, but he's entering his age 29 season. He has 4 years left on his contract plus a fifth voided year, so we're just going to say 4 years left, and we're going to just mention the void years for cap purposes only. His deal, the dead cap goes like this: 2022, $28 million. 23, it's $21 million. In 24, it's $10 million. And in 25, it's $4 million. So 2025, at age 32, he counts $17 million against the cap, 17.5, and $4.6 million dead cap. So that's a pretty easy year. If he's not performing by 2025, then that's an easy year for the team to get out, which means they're kind of locked in for 3 seasons on Kittle. But even 2024 is a potential out because their cap hit is $20 million, and the dead cap at that point is $10.7 million. So they can save about half the contract in 2024 if he's not doing well. But that said, if he's performing still at an all-pro level, I could see him playing through the 2024 season. So if I'm the George Kittle owner, 29 years old, tight ends do last a little bit long. I'm locking in 3 years in my mind in his role with the 49ers, and then just being aware that 2025 season, if he's not at that level anymore, they're probably going to find a way to rework that deal or move on. The rest of the tight end room, I expected more because the 49ers use a lot of multiple tight ends, but Tyler Kroft is 30 years old, 1 year, $1.2 million deal. Russ Dwelly, 27 years old, 1 year, $1 million deal. The total guarantees between both of them under $300,000 combined. So neither is a roster lock, but they do need some backup tight ends there. And then they have Tanner Hudson and Troy Fumagalli. So it's really George Kittle and no air in sight was my note. So maybe this is a position they look to draft next year because, like we said, Kittle's probably in 3 to 4 years, 4 years max for what he has left in this offense, I would say. That's the San Francisco 49ers, and I think just to summarize our points again, Trey Lance, 2 more seasons, Garoppolo, they got to do something with him before August 31st, otherwise they're on the hook for that contract. It's not Madden where we can listen to me and hold on to him to keep him away from the Seahawks, so he's probably gone. Running backs, these bigger backs makes you think, is it the option offense having a Thunder to go along with Trey Lance? Makes me a little interested in Tyrion Davis-Price. And then Brandon Ayuk, 3rd year of his rookie deal. A lot to gain this season, and I think he's going to do it. So if you can get him in your Dynasty League still, I would think about it. For anyone in my Dynasty League, the owner for Brandon Ayuk is high on him. So I don't know. You can go and sniff around it if you want, but based on personal experience, I'd probably just save your time and effort for now. Moving on to Arizona, and we're going to kick it off with Kyler Murray. We are not going to talk about Kyler Murray's study provision in his contract, unfortunately. All money here. But, I mean, massive deal for him. 5-year, $230 million extension, $160 million guaranteed. Of that, $104 million is guaranteed at signing. Just to explain what that means, like, no matter what happens performance-wise, he's guaranteed $104 million. The other guarantees, usually it's like 2023 salary guarantees at the start of the league year. 2024 salary guarantees at the start of the league year. That sort of thing. When you say a contract has 160 million guarantees, it's including those future guarantees, and there's a certain amount that's guaranteed at signing. So that's what the difference is there. Look, regardless of what anyone wants to say about Kyler Murray and what the team thinks of him, this contract tells you they're highly committed. And I mean, this year it's a $110 million dead cap. I'm sure that's not surprising at all. That dead cap number doesn't get under 30 million until 2026, where he's on the cap for the highest cap hit of this contract in 2026 of $55.5 million. 20 million of it is dead cap. So they're really on the hook for Kyler Murray for quite a bit, and he's earned it. 2027 is really the first realistic out, and that would be his age 30 season. $43 million cap hit with $7 million dead cap. And, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but typically similar to the Debo deal, the cash starts to go down for the player too. But based on these numbers, I would expect they rework a deal, maybe another extension in the 2026-2027 timeline. But if you're a Dynasty owner, I mean, that's down the road. You're counting in 5 years minimum he's going to be with the Arizona Cardinals, barring a trade. So a lot of security here if you're the Kyler Murray owner in Dynasty. 25 years old. I do know his contract. I heard it had a clause about baseball. So I was about to say, like, you can forget about all those silly baseball rumors, but I think they did build in the clause where something voids, or I don't know exactly what it is. I'd have to, again, we're looking mainly at the money when we're looking up and doing the research for this podcast, so we don't have that. But so maybe you're not completely out of the baseball woods, but I'm sorry. The team is telling you with this money right here that they believe they're fully committing to him. And now I'm even regretting bringing up the baseball stuff. So we're just going to forget that even happened and move on from Kyler Murray. Colt McCoy, 2-year, $7.5 million deal. $6 million of that is guaranteed. Both it's spread through the 2 seasons. So he's a likely backup here for 2 seasons if you're looking for a backup to Kyler Murray in a super flex. Then you have Trace McSorley. He was with the Ravens before. 1 year, $965K, no guarantees. So not a whole lot to note there. They're not really committed to him. It's really Kyler Murray and Colt McCoy here. And then an undrafted free agent I hadn't heard of, Jarrett Garantano. Jarrett Garantano. And I just wrote Garantano, meaning no guaranteed money. And that is a terrible joke. Not funny at all, but he's not guaranteed any money. He's just an undrafted free agent. Probably not going to have any relevant whatsoever. But hey, if you need to remember how much guaranteed money he is, just has on his contract. Just look at his last name. And that's the last we'll probably hear of him here on this podcast. Outside of that embarrassment, we'll move on to the running back position with James Conner, fresh new 3-year, $21 million deal. $13.5 million of that is guaranteed. What I found interesting with this one is it's a 3-year deal, but there's a clear out here in 2024 where he has a $6.9 million cap hit with only $2 million of that being dead. So it looks more like a two-year, $16 million deal. So if you're the James Conner owner, he's 27 years old. Treat him as having this role for two seasons. Then he'll be 29. And who knows what happens with a 29-year-old back at that point. So really a 2-year asset in a dynasty league, I think you're looking at James Conner. His likely backup, the money tells us Darrell Williams, but that might just be because he's the only veteran here. 1 year, $1.1 million deal, $1 million guaranteed. So you know he's on the roster. So if you're looking for a running back stash, it would be Darrell Williams. It's enough money to be a roster lock and have a shot at that backup role. That said, I know Eno Benjamin had a little bit of hype coming from training camp. He's in the 3rd year of his rookie deal. He only has $51,000 dead cap because he was a late round pick. I mean, he's in his third season. He's had some flashes, but you like to see a running back flash more before he gets into his third year. So I'm personally not buying on Benjamin. But if you're in a deep dynasty league and he's just sitting there on the waiver wire, it's not a bad addition because I have heard some rumblings of him taking some of the Chase Edmonds role. And he's young, but again, like there's absolutely no guarantee. There's barely any guarantees in his contract, so you can't really count on it either way here. Kiante Ingram was a 6th-round pick this year. It was a 4-year rookie deal, $170,000 guaranteed on his contract. So again, you see how these late-round picks, they really get hosed with their guarantees and their bonus money. So hard to really say much about Kiante Ingram other than some people thought he was talented. He'll be here. He could be here for a few years, kind of like Benjamin, and could win that role. So Ingram and Benjamin really competing there. Then you get to Jonathan Ward. He was a 2020 undrafted free agent. He's a restricted free agent after this season, so he's cheap, under team control, plays on special teams. They liked him last preseason, so I think he makes the team and plays really as a special teamer. And a couple undrafted free agents, Ronnie Rivers and TJ Pledger. And again, we're looking forward to roster cut down day here because not too much we want to dig into their contracts on. But the high level here would be James Conner for 2 more seasons and Darrell Williams, the veteran. So I would assume it's him and one of the younger players sort of competing to oust him for the backup running back role. At wide receiver, you're looking at DeAndre Hopkins. And one note I found here was how DeAndre Hopkins' contract really lines up with Marquise Brown. Makes the trade make a little bit more sense to me. Hopkins is entering his age 30 season. He's got 3 years left on his deal. And that final year, 2024, is voidable by Hopkins under certain conditions. I think one of them was like 5,000 receiving yards possibly since 2020. And it doesn't look very likely because of what he sat out with for the 2021 season. So I don't think he's going to hit the statistical measures because of his injury last year and his suspension to start this year. So I think he's locked in on that 2024 season. But let's look at the cap hits. So we're going to go this year through 2024. $17.9 million, $30.7 million, $26.2 million. And then dead cap, 33.9, 22.6, 11.3. So he's here for at least 2 more seasons. And then after that, you're really looking at, they have a decision to make where he's entering his age 32 season at that point. And he'll be on a $26 million cap hit with 11 dead cap. So they can move in on that point. So I think 2024 is the realistic year where they're going to save more money. 2023, they could get out, but it's a $22 million dead cap on $30 million. So only $8 million saved. Seems highly unlikely they would get rid of him in that year unless he was really, really hit the decline, because if you save $8 million, are you really going to find a good replacement for Hopkins? You're already in for that 22. So I don't see them moving on in 2023. I think you're looking 2 more seasons. So I would say, as if you're the dynasty manager of DeAndre Hopkins, you're planning for 2 more seasons in Arizona. Which brings us to Marquise Brown, who is in the last year of his rookie deal. The Arizona Cardinals traded a first-round pick, and there was change in both directions. But first-round pick for Marquise Brown, 4th year of his rookie deal, and they immediately exercised his 5th-year option for 2023. So I expect a long-term deal at some point in the next 12 months, I would say, because we just looked at Hopkins. He's probably just going to play 2 more seasons in Arizona based on his contract. And then Marquise Brown would be a great immediate guy to just replace him as the alpha in this offense. So I think they're going to extend Brown before he hits that 5th-year option. And this, to me, makes him a strong dynasty buy because there's a non-zero chance here. Marquise Brown is the number one for Kyler Murray for multiple seasons at some point. And sure, they could bring in someone else, but I think based on Hopkins being 30 years old, he's maxing out 2 years left with the Cardinals, and Brown's probably going to get an extension. I would like to invest in Marquise Brown in the Dynasty League based on that scenario. Rondell Moore, age 22 season, his second year of his rookie deal. He's got a big opportunity with Kirk gone. I think my only concern with Rondell Moore, it's not contract related, and we've seen with these young players and their contracts, there's not a ton to discuss because they're just on their rookie deal. They're extremely affordable. But my concern is that when Hopkins returns, they like having two big guys on the outside, and they don't really switch the sides of the field that often. So last year it was Hopkins and A.J. Green. I think there's a non-zero chance they have Hopkins on one side, A.J. Green on the other, and Marquise Brown as a speed slot. And that would leave Rondell Moore in the same role he had last year. So I think when the season starts, they're forced to play Marquise Brown on the outside. But, let's see what happens here. Because if A.J. Green shows he can still do enough on the outside, Rondell Moore could be out of a strong opportunity when the time that Hopkins returns. Speaking of A.J. Green, age 34 season, 1 year, $3.5 million deal. $3 million of that is guaranteed, so he's making the roster. They added 2 void years at the end to spread the cap hit. Honestly, if you're in the Dynasty, the best you can hope for is a repeat of last season, which is the scenario above. Like, if A.J. Green plays like he did last year, outside of that Packers game, then there's a chance it is Hopkins, Green, and then Brown in the slot. So you just got to think range of outcomes sometimes. I'm a guy, I like Rondell Moore's opportunity, and I want to see what he can do in a more traditional wide receiver role. But I do have that in the back of my mind that, like, they're really static with what they do here in Arizona with their receivers. There's a chance A.J. Green's really the guy they're relying on the outside, along with Hopkins when he returns. Remaining players, Antoine Wesley, Andy Isabella. Wesley, we'll talk a little bit here because he has 1 year left, $825K on his deal, no guarantee money. He's an exclusive rights free agent. And really the difference between an exclusive rights free agent and a restricted free agent is you need 4 accredited seasons to hit unrestricted free agency in the NFL. And so if you hit if your contract expires and you've only been in the league for 2 years, you typically become an exclusive rights free agent. And this is only really because, like, a rookie gets a 4-year deal off the bat, so it's not an issue. But an undrafted free agent, they get a 2-year deal, say, or something. When that expires, like it would for Wesley at the end of this year, he has under 3 accredited seasons, so he's an exclusive rights free agent. And that just means the team has to give a tender offer, and then he can't negotiate with other teams. He can accept that tender offer, but he's locked into the team as long as they give him that minimum offer. Restricted free agency will happen next year for Antoine Wesley, and that's when you have 3 accredited seasons, so you have more than enough to not be an exclusive rights free agent, but you're a restricted free agent because you don't have 4 seasons. And again, the team can offer you a tender offer. The only difference is restricted free agents can negotiate with other teams, and if the other team signs them to an offer sheet, then there's usually compensation that goes back and forth. Like, different tenders are like you can offer them at a first round tender that's expensive, and then it's a first round pick that comes in return. So that's the difference between the two terms, exclusive rights free agent and restricted free agent. All this to say, Antoine Wesley has a lot of team control left, so I expect him on the team, and he did enough in that outside role to be a good depth piece for them. Andy Isabella, still on the roster. Not a surprise. I've been sort of shopping him. Last year of his rookie deal, only $340,000 dead cap, so they can move on quite easily from Andy Isabella. He's going to be on the trade block pretty much all offseason, I would say. I mean, all training camp, and if someone has an injury and they want to bring him in, he's definitely available for them. Moving on to the tight end position here, I know we've gone a little bit longer than we've typically gone, so I'm going to try to get through this pretty quickly for you guys. Luckily, there's really only two players that you're going to worry about in a Dynasty format, Zach Ertz and Trey McBride. Zach Ertz signed a new 3-year, $31 million extension, $17.5 million of that being guaranteed. It looks more like a 2-year, $21 million deal because that third year, 2024, his cap hit is $12 million and the dead cap's only $4 million. So they can move on from him pretty easily. And I would expect that at that time he'd be going into his age 34 season. So I think that 2024 year is probably unlikely to happen for him. So look at Zach Ertz as a 2-year asset for yourself in a Dynasty format. Trey McBride lines up pretty well with him. And I kind of like the draft pick now that I looked at Zach Ertz's contract because McBride has a 4-year rookie deal. And what we typically see with tight ends, such a hard position to learn because you're not learning just the receiver position. And I'm not belittling that either. That's tough. But you have to learn some of the protections. You have to block. You have to learn the run scheme. So we see, tight ends, it takes them a little bit longer to hit their stride. And they usually hit their stride and break out in year 3. So for Trey McBride, year 3 is 2024, which is the year we said is unlikely for Zach Ertz. So, if you have Trey McBride in the Dynasty, throw him on your taxi squad. I sort of think it's going to be Ertz this year and next year. And then in his third season, Trey McBride is likely to emerge there and take that role fully from Zach Ertz. Maybe next year it's even more like an Ertz, Dallas Goedert type situation. I know poor Zach Ertz finally gets out of Dallas Goedert and ends up with Trey McBride, but that's what we're looking at here in the future. A couple other players we hadn't gone over, Steven Anderson, Max Williams, both 1-year deals, both just depth pieces here for the Cardinals. So I think it really is just Zach Ertz and Trey McBride. Overall, on the Cardinals, Kyler Murray's here for a long time. Then you got a couple of just veterans who are probably 2 to 3. James Conner, 2 seasons we're looking at. Zach Ertz, 2 seasons is what the contract is telling you. And then Deandre Hopkins, likely 2 seasons what the contract is telling you. And that third, we'll see how he's playing by the time it's 2024. But definitely older skill position here and expensive for the Arizona Cardinals. So hopefully they can hit in this year because it certainly looks like they've spent a lot of money here. And, they're aging at their primary skill positions. Well, that's all the time we have for you guys today. Appreciate you listening again. Please find us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Like and subscribe. Find me at Twitter at @TheFantasyCPA. We will be back at you next week with the final 2 teams in the NFC West, which, embarrassingly, when you're under pressure on the podcast, see if I get it right, with the Seattle Seahawks and the Los Angeles Rams. Unbelievable. Showing my age here. But Rams and Seahawks on the next episode. Maybe we'll touch on some training camp items. Apologies for this one being a little bit longer. We had definitely some interesting contracts on both of these teams to talk about. And again, keep an eye out for that San Francisco backfield. And don't rule out those bigger backs there. So I'm Brandon DeFreitas. Thanks for listening again to the All Aboard podcast. And we'll be back here next week. Thank you, everyone.